Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's session on collective intelligence. And I was just explaining how, as an engineer, I think I practiced it. And I didn't really know that's what I was doing. But we were all doing that together because we don't really know everything about a project. We know our bit, and we know that other people have to do their bits so that the whole thing works. And so effectively, a project team has greater intelligence than any individual in the project team. And to me, civilization is actually a huge engineering project. It's an engineering project in which we figure out how are we going to get food to people, how do we meet all the necessities of life, how do we make sure that we are living in a clean environment, that the animals are happy and healthy, and that we are all thriving on this planet. So that to me is an engineering project as to how do we do that. And how do we do that using everyone's experience, everyone's knowledge, so we can all put our gifts into it to collectively make this the best planet that it can be. In however way we define that. And I think I would say that defining that as the planet in which life is flourishing, that there are no species going extinct, there are no forests being burned down unnecessarily. I would think that these are all simple metrics that we can use to figure out how are we acting together as a species. Now, our guests today, Jamen, Shively, and Nolan Strait, have figured out how to formalize the collecting of intelligence. In fact, let me just start by asking you, what is collective intelligence? Can you define that for us?
Sure. I would define it as, one way of defining it is the emergent intelligence that exists between us and in groups of people, not just people, but animals as well. Mm-hmm. It's an intelligence that we don't tap into without some kind of conversation. And you could think of conversation in a very abstract sense. But this, what we're doing right now over Zoom, being a very engaging form of that conversation and very immediate. And so the feedback we're getting from each other is, helping correct our, it's exposing we're seeing ourselves reflected back through one another in this indra's-net kind of way. And there's lots of ways that collective intelligence is facilitated. Books and writing allowed us to be engaged in collective intelligence across time and space, so that we didn't have to be meeting face to face. Right. And it's come full circle now in a beautiful way, where we're able to hop here from different parts of the world. And Jamen and I are just like a 10-minute drive away, but we're quite a distance from you, Silas. And yeah, so the tools for helping us engage with this emergent intelligence that exists in communities and between us, those tools have improved dramatically. And the vision or definition of collective intelligence for Jamen and I has a lot to do with the evolution of those tools and the possibilities that those open up.
Right. So you're saying that in the past, we had maybe collective intelligence that were localized, when you could converse with each other locally. And then we moved on to a place where it was non-localized in time, and we started writing books, correct? And time and space, but it was slow because you had to go buy a book, you had to go get it shipped from one place to another if you're in a different place. And now you're saying that we have accelerated it. Is that correct? To a point where we are conversing across space boundaries and and even time, because we can store our videos and watch it.
Yeah, and then on top of just the raw video itself, there's transcripts now, which
right.
Can be generated. So we're effectively doing that writing process. We can do that very spontaneously, and then I'd like Jamen to get more into the vision of what's possible with that.
Okay.
Sure, happy to. Great to see you, Silas. Great to see everyone. And what a great conversation. And what a great person to be having the conversation with, because as an accomplished PhD electrical engineer, ranking engineer within Intel, going way back to the foundations of the internet, I once toured Intel with my graduate course from UC Berkeley, and their main headquarters anyway, and it was just fascinating, all the different moving parts and chemical delivery systems and masking and this and that. Woof! Well, what a complex civilization under one roof right there. Right. That would have been totally impossible without a very sophisticated collective intelligence, including email and fax machines and 3D AutoCAD files that can be shared and analyzed and all this stuff. And so the first, one point I want to make, rather than, in addition to propping you up, is that this is collective intelligence, right? And it doesn't, it's not, and the greater that we expand the conversation and the number of people involved in the conversation, including about what it is, right, is crucial. So I'll just throw in a couple of points building off of Nolan's great intro there, is that, and yours, Silas, is that I see it as sort of a co-evolution of the what and the how of collective intelligence, but then the why, right? So the how, as Nolan was saying, at first, go back tens of thousands of years ago, we only had one how, and that was talking to each other face to face. And I love that we could hear the frogs in the background of your place there, Nolan. They're talking with each other. They're applying collective intelligence. They're sharing information about food, about predators, about shelter, about whatever. And that's fundamentally what we do and what the crows do and what all different species do. As a tool-using species, we developed ways to expand this. So for example, writing, you no longer have to be face-to-face. It can be disseminated and you can read from afar. And then of course with the internet, that just whoosh, totally expanded our abilities to see both written information initially and then videos with YouTube and whatnot. So the how of collective intelligence has been greatly expanding. And then of course, this is sort of kind of like the current ultimate form of a medium for collective intelligence. And so this is all expanding tremendously. And especially right now that everyone's at home, plugged into their computer, we no longer meet at the office or the Starbucks or the church or wherever. We meet here on Zoom, right? So, but with essentially zero transportation cost. Right. So we've greatly accelerated things. But then that leads us to the question of why? Why are we, what are we doing with collective intelligence, the what and the why? And for thousands of years, going right back to the frogs that we were just hearing, it was about food and shelter and survival and protection from predators and all that. So I would sum that up as, us looking out for our interests, right? The frogs are looking out for their interests. We look out for ours. Everyone's kind of looking out for their own interests, all the way to super advanced Intel, which is figuring out, yes, how do we produce, valuable products for the world, chips and computers and whatnot, but also how do we make money? And therein kind of highlights a major issue with our application of collective intelligence. We've had a very narrow focus. Now, which is basically propping up our own interests: food, shelter, being able to reproduce and have abundance so we can have lots of kids and all that stuff, just speaking of us as a species in aggregate. But it was collective intelligence itself, between satellite imagery and remote sensing and science and whatnot, that helped us figure out, hey, in the process of us looking out for what we want, good, bad, or ugly, we're also destroying the planet in the process. So we developed that awareness. And now there's this evolving, well, it's been evolving for decades, but movement to how do we heal the planet? And also, you know, how do we transform ourselves? Are we even playing the right game? You know, playing this game of accumulation and growth and all that. Is that even the right, you know, why are we here? So there's now kind of, you know, two more imperatives that have been added to the survival imperative. How do we heal and protect our home, our common home, Mother Earth? And then, you know, what is our story? Who are we? Why are we here? You know, how did we get here? Where are we going? So, and what's really super unique about this moment right now is that whereas, you know, 25 years ago, we were a small minority of those of us who are deeply concerned about the planet and how things are evolving. Now with Corona and everyone grounded at home, everyone is just painfully aware that things are not right here on Mother Earth. And what do we do about it? And now, and also everyone's on Zoom now. So it's like we have the perfect conditions for this collective intelligence to focus in on, you know, on what can we do to transform our world and save life on Earth. And I'd like to pivot at this point and say that, you know, in terms of, you know, what is collective intelligence, I would offer that it is, in addition to everything Nolan said, which was spot on, and what you've said, Silas, it's we see this evolving collective intelligence as kind of like conversational machinery for us, for humanity to come together and A, generate great ideas like veganism, and B, figure out the how do we get this implemented at planetary scale. And anyway, I've kind of been talking a lot, so I'm going to go on mute. Love to hear from you, Silas and Nolan. So let's keep it flowing.
Well, you call it radical collective intelligence. So what is radical collective intelligence? And how does it differ from plain collective intelligence?
Yeah, absolutely. So radical collective intelligence, and it's something that you practice within Vegan World 2026. We've just given it a name. And so let's just differentiate. So simple collective intelligence would be like, okay, you know, killing animals is bad and it's harmful to ecosystems and to the poor animals themselves. Let's stop doing it, right? So that's, you know, that came out of collective intelligence. Radical collective intelligence goes deeper and says, hey, you know, what's up with us that we would even want to go killing animals in the first place? How did we get into this cycle?
Right.
Because it's now part of our culture and everything, and backyard barbecues and all that stuff that I grew up with. I'm inclined to think that it's okay. So it's like we've all trained ourselves that it's okay to kill and eat animals. So radical is getting to the roots. I mean, that's what radical means. It comes from the same Latin root. It comes from the Latin root radix, which is the same root as the word root. So it literally means getting to the root.
Right.
How did we get here, and how do we solve our problems at their root causes, right? And so for me, one of the root causes is separation. This very concept that we're separate. And you know, how did that come into being, and how it's you know, kept itself alive, right? This illusion, this great lie that we're all separate and it's okay for me to kill you because you're separate from me. I won't hurt myself. In fact, I'll benefit from killing you because now I've got more meat that I can eat, and all those things. So getting to separation as a root cause, etc. So it's just getting to the root.
I see. Okay, got it. So yeah, we at Climate Healers, we use the story of the thermostat species, the climate regulator species, as the underlying story that connects us all. And of course, the COVID-19 disease and the coronavirus has literally connected us all by pointing out that what one person did in China can affect the whole entire planet. You know, so that one act that made a virus jump is now affecting everybody. So we do now realize that that we are all connected. We are all connected, and that we all have a stake in this together. If you get sick, I may get sick eventually. So it's in my best interest to make sure that you don't get sick, right? And this now applies to anyone around the planet. So in a way, this is nature's way of teaching us to first take care of ourselves and to sit in our cocoon. I mean, that's what I call this the chrysalis phase that we are in. So we have been put into this chrysalis phase, and now we have to figure out how do we organize ourselves going out when we become the butterfly species. How do we organize ourselves so that we don't have to just rely on one person making decisions, who usually does not have all the information to make decisions, right? Because we stand here and we sit here and we watch our leaders and we think, I mean, do they not know that eating animals caused this in the first place? How come they don't even talk about it? I mean, I just cannot believe any engineering project could be run like that, okay, where people pretend something isn't true when it is. But, I mean, Jamen, you used to work for Microsoft, right? Have you ever seen a situation like this, where you like shaking someone?
No, it's absolutely laughable. So when you think of a competent, anyway, that's right. A loaded word, and we could go into that. But on the surface anyway, a competent corporation like a Microsoft or an Intel not addressing the root cause of a fundamental issue, I mean, it's just unthinkable, right? And so to see how corporate humanity, but see that really gets to the heart of it. We are not acting as a corporation. We're acting as a bunch of competitors, hiding information, obfuscating, lying, right, deceiving, distorting. And that's where I think we have an opportunity here to do what Linux did, Linus Torvalds and Linux did in the computer industry, going back now decades, was to start an open source operating system based on a whole new set of principles, right? And so we're creating an open source collective intelligence, all of us. And we're doing it right here, right now in this meeting. This whole network of meetings is it's a network that doesn't really think of itself as a network yet, right? Oh, we're just getting on Zoom and having a meeting, right? Yeah, we may be broadcasting it, fine, but even that's the old paradigm. The new paradigm is a vast, interconnected, hyper-connected network of these conversations where we've got total transparency and visibility and joinability. Anyone can join any conversation. I'm talking about the ideal. Obviously, private meetings are important, of course, but these public meetings are the vehicle, I believe. This network of public meetings is the vehicle for us to get together and begin to think as one integrated humanity. And then, of course, being able to give voice to the voiceless, everything from a biologist who specializes in frogs to me, an amateur biologist who literally talks with the crows every day, several times a day. They've got a brilliant collective intelligence that we're now tapping into and learning from. All of us together giving voice to the voiceless, to all the species and ecosystems. Now we can have a conversation that's at the level of the whole of Mother Earth, all of her children talking together, right? Which is how we sort things out, in conversation. But in this case, a network of conversation. Imagine millions of Zoom video conferences happening in parallel, all hyper-connected because they're, for one thing, recorded and broadcast, but also transcribed into text, and that text transcript can be continuously indexed in real time. Now we have programmatic visibility and access to the other conversations. And so if we're having a really cool idea here that just occurred to us for the first time, up on the screen could appear, hey, there's 5 other conversations that are also talking about this idea. And 3 of them want to get together and merge. Do you accept? We're like, I don't know, Silas, no, what do you think, right? See, we're now imagining into a world where the connections are much richer, deeper, and more fluid, right? So if we think of each of us as a neuron, what we're now doing is creating the synaptic connections between all of us neurons so that information can flow freely between the neurons. Now we're talking about a planetary brain, a collective super intelligence, which we are literally right at the cusp of right now. And in fact, we have all the tools. We've got all the wiring, all the switches, all your great electrical engineering stylish. All the tools are right in front of us to do it We just have to commit to doing it and do it and follow through.
Yeah. Nolan, let me ask you about the details of it, right? How do we have transcription that we can do from language to language, from translation that can happen literally real time? Is that possible these days?
Yeah, I know that Zoom has been working on this for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
And they were working on not only live transcription, but also translation in meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Although I don't think that's a very public thing at this time,
Mm-hmm.
but something they discussed at their Zoomtopia event that I attended in the fall of last year.
Mm-hmm.
So the technologies are definitely, I wouldn't say I definitely feel that we're anticipating something that's very close, but the pieces aren't quite there yet. But but what it will enable is something powerful enough that just the message of the anticipation and planning for a future, which includes the integration of these technologies, that's really important, because it's going to radically change the way that we are organizing, communicating, being.
Right. Fundamentally, we are, so long as we are all in the same team and we are playing the same game towards the same goal, I see this obviously will work, right? Because we have seen it work in corporations. When we do a project, we know we are all working for the same goal. And so I can trust my colleagues to do what is right for the good of the whole, right? It's only when we play this game of, what is in it for me? This game of Monopoly, and simultaneously try to do something that is collective. It doesn't seem to work, right? So first, fundamentally, we need to align our objectives. Yeah, we are all in this to make the planet thrive. Once we agree on that, I think we can deploy these technologies for this purpose. Have you been looking into, just a slight aside, I was reading about Konz Lobochikov, who's a professor at Northern Arizona University, who has been able to translate the language of the prairie dog. Okay, so he did that by just recording the sounds of a prairie dog, and giving the prairie dog different stimulus to see whether the same sounds come out, and they did. So using that, he was able to decode the language of a prairie dog. And he claims that with this technology, you can actually decode the language of all the animals. I mean, I think there are people who understand animals already, but there are some of us who don't have that skill, probably depend on technology to be able to understand what the animals are saying. So do you envision a time when we could be just listening to the animals and then figuring out what they are saying, getting feedback from them, and then using that to drive our collective intelligence decision-making processes?
Well, I could certainly envision that, but before seeing that happening, like on a massive scale, I see the integration of the just conversations between humans is the precursor, but I love the idea of integrating animals into the network in that way, and I have not thought about that very much. That's very interesting research.
Right. I actually, I was doing research on my book Carbon Yoga when I came across Professor Slobodzikov's work, and he spent 20 years doing that work. So it was incredible.
Wow, I'm so inspired because like I talk with the crows, but I don't have, I'd love for him or someone like him or some team like it to record crows. I know some studies have been done on crows. I don't know to what extent, but there is obviously complex communication going on there. And imagine that the Northern Arizona professor were to then take the next step and say, all right, what if I communicate these sounds to the dogs and say, hey, there's food over here or shelter over here or water over there or whatever, can we start a dialogue, right? And the dogs might say, thank you, or, or I don't know you, who are you, whatever, but something. And then, we start this cross-species dialogue. I think that's really the future, right?
Right. So we need to first get our game right, though.
Yeah, exactly. We first have to figure out how to communicate with each other, and what is our intent, and what game are we playing. And in fact, one of the things that we're working on right now, or at least I've been working, it's a loose thing, we haven't totally built it, but is to create a game analogous to Monopoly, but instead of being about hoarding, it's about healing and sharing, where we fundamentally practice our vision of collective superintelligence within the game, right? And so Monopoly, you go around the board. In our game, there would just be a very clear and simple taxonomy. Let me just give you an idea what that taxonomy would start to look like. So at the bottom, we've got the roots, just like the roots of a tree, the roots of our problems. And then up from that, we've got kind of symptoms. And one of those would be organized crime. Well, there's different kinds of organized crime. There's organized crime against animals. That's what Vegan World 2026 is largely, but not entirely, about stopping. And there's organized crimes against humans, organized crimes against entire ecosystems. The modern logging industry is an organized crime, an organized assault on whole ecosystems. And I could go on and on, but just organized crime presents this kind of central pivoting topic, and then you can branch out to those other three that I just mentioned. Likewise with planetary overheating, what are its root causes? What are the solutions? And so, a simplified map that addresses our most urgent problems right now: coronavirus, planetary overheating, violence, organized crimes against life. Just starting with those, oh my goodness, if we could take out those big four, whoosh, wow, where do we go from there? And so this leads to a conversation about prioritization, and then ultimately to, okay, great, now that we've got these major goals identified that have bubbled to the top in the game, okay, how do we generate solutions, and how do we generate solutions in time? Because from certain perspectives, like Guy McPherson's, time is running out, right? And we potentially have very little of it left. So that is what has inspired us to put the focus on, not so much on specific solutions like what you and your organization, which I'm happy to be a part of, are focused on. How do we get the world to go vegan? But what I refer to as the meta solution. So if veganism is a solution, what is the meta solution that will generate all the solutions that we need, right? All the individual components and parts of the massive Intel company that generates so many, hundreds of millions of incredible devices. So that is collective superintelligence. And the game is sort of like the beginning of that. So if I were a sociopath and I wanted my kids to grow up to be sociopath real estate moguls, I'd give them the game of Monopoly. We are in the process of gifting to the world an analogous game that will help us in this big picture that I've described.
Yeah, in fact, I think Ray had shared with me an article describing the original Monopoly game as it was invented by Elizabeth Magie in 1904. It was actually called Monopoly and Prosperity. So she had a prosperity version of the game, where the object of the game is for everyone playing to make sure that the person who has the least at least doubles their income. Okay, so, and she even had rules for that game. So when Charles Darrow bought it from her, and he sold it to Parker Brothers in 1930 something, Parker Brothers decided to take out the prosperity part and only make it Monopoly, right? So her original vision was to show us that the game you're playing is going to cause this problem. And therefore, here's another way to play the game, right? That would show that all of us can lift each other up in the game. And so actually that article has the rules for that new game, the game of prosperity, and including, in fact, the original board that Elizabeth Magie had designed. Yeah. It's fascinating to read the history of that. But we are now stuck in just the Monopoly game, because that's what we have implemented. But I think now it is time for us to rediscover, what our ancestors were teaching us with the prosperity version of the game, and go back to doing that. So we are already more than half an hour into this conversation. So I'm going to ask Deborah if there are questions from the participants that you could be addressing these days, for the rest of the time.
Sure. I'll start with a couple from the Q&A box, and it looks like we have them coming in from all directions. We have the Zoom chat, we have the Facebook feed, everybody's logging questions. So I'll start with one here. It says, how do we balance using technology with security? There are concerning reports about Zoom, for example, and that's from Dr. Priya. Jamen, if you're speaking, you're muted.
Oh yeah, no, I was thinking, but now I'll think out loud.
Okay.
So obviously security is a big topic. Silas knows way more about it than I do. So does Nolan. But I'll just say that as security technology, it's really co-evolving with essentially virus technology, for lack of a better word, malevolent use of technology. And there's always a risk, and there's just different levels of security depending on what you do. Having said all that, okay, I have chosen to just jump in and do it anyway, because there are far greater risks than someone doing something with my data than they shouldn't. And there are people who won't get on Zoom video conferences precisely because of that, because they're afraid. But like the fireman who runs into a burning building knowing that there are risks, I've got a job to do. And so I'm jumping in and doing everything I can to promote this collective superintelligence in spite of the risk. That's my 2 cents. And now I defer to greater minds about security.
Well, I'll just say very briefly, I'm no expert in security, but I think there is a serious conversation to be had around open sourcing. Mm-hmm. And if we are using the best practices that we know of collectively to secure people's information, and that's open and free to see for everyone, you can go in, and if you're a programmer, you can look at exactly what the tools we're using, what they're doing. That's extremely powerful. And I mean, I envision a Linux of Zoom integrated with other technologies that becomes a standard, and I can't speak too much on security in details, but that's what it brings up for me.
Yeah, I think when it comes to security, you need to have the ability to provide input anonymously, okay, when you want to, and also to be able to provide input openly when you want to. So that choice should be left up to the individual. And security should ensure that whatever is presented anonymously is kept anonymous. So this will feel like they can participate in this without fear. That's ultimately the goal, right? So without judged.
Okay, I have a couple of questions from the Zoom. One is, what are the tech tools that enhance collective intelligence beyond the accumulation of human conversations and ideas?
I'd love to start with that one. Let's think of accumulation of conversation and ideas as kind of like the accumulation of straw, right? What is needed then is a machinery to convert that, to spin that straw into gold, right? And that is much of the focus of collectives, of our work and other work around collective superintelligence, is how do we take this stream? So this video is being recorded, it will be transcribed at some point. So how do we take all that data? The transcription is very actionable data because you can index it and search it, and we know what to do with text. What do we do with this massive stream of recorded video, where you get to see Silas's facial expression, Nolan getting excited, you know, etc., and everyone's reactions? This is super valuable data that can be spun into the gold of the synaptic connections that are beckoning to be formed, that haven't formed yet. That's my beginning of an answer.
Okay, thank you. How does artificial intelligence figure into all this?
Yeah, another one I'd love to, and by the way, when I start an answer, what I'm really doing is offering it up to then Silas and Nolan and whoever else to build upon. But in terms of the machinery for spinning straw into gold, artificial intelligence can be deployed to automate a lot of those processes. So for example, just indexing itself is way more efficiently done by AI than by humans. Automatic transcription is another example, translation, etc. But now as we get more into the finer details of spinning the straw into gold, there would be, for example, the ability for us at the end of this conversation to say, man, this was a great conversation. I'd love to have more conversations like that. And then the AI could look through the whole corpus of recorded and transcribed conversations and look for what are the patterns that result in a conversation being successful. You know, does it have to do with the combination of people in that conversation, the presentation of topics, the number of people, the rules, you know, 1 minute cap versus 5 minute cap for speakers, et cetera, et cetera. And so AI can help tease out what made that a successful conversation and how do we facilitate more of those. That's just one example.
Right. So basically you're using AI as a tool to help us have better conversations, as opposed to AI making its own decisions for us, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right, Silas. And for that purpose, we could use 1990s old AI technology and it would do just fine, right?
Right.
So the intelligence is in the humans. It's in our conversation. Yeah, fine, one day, maybe 50 years from now, we'll have strong AI, fine. But today, we got to go to war with coronavirus, planetary overheating, and violence with the tools that we've got. And right now, the best intelligent tools that we've got are human beings connected together. So we're using AI as a lesser form of intelligence, just providing the connective tissue so that the higher form of intelligence, collective human intelligence, can really flourish. And I didn't mean to interrupt you, Silas. I was just got
No, that's perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, and another one is, what about the next generation of search engines? Do you see collective intelligence influencing that?
Oh my goodness. Yes. And I'm sorry for jumping in, everyone. Just hold your hand if you want to talk before me. So here's the thing. Take all of the data from all these conversations. One of the things that we urgently need is exactly that, a search engine that is specialized for searching through transcripts and other data associated with conversations, precisely so that people can find not the website they're looking for, but the conversation that they're looking for, so that they can jump in and either maximize their potential contribution or maximize their learning and interacting with folks so that they can best figure out where they want to contribute, and myriad other associated scenarios. Now, collective superintelligence itself, as it evolves and as it expands, will precisely empower us to come up with better AI technology and better search technology. And in fact, Silas, if I could screen share here,
Sure.
Some images will help make the point. So these images are about the coevolution between the platform for collective intelligence, represented by this blue box, and the actual collective intelligence, which grows on top of it by all of us getting together and using the tools. And as more and more people join, the actual collective intelligence grows and grows and grows. And at some point, it actually gets constrained by the box itself that it's growing in or on top of, the platform. And so let's say that one of those elements of the platform is exactly search itself, one of the things that's missing. So as this collective intelligence grows from tiny to big, it will now have better capabilities to design and build the next generation platform, which can support a greatly expanded collective intelligence, and so on, and so on, and so on. And of course, included in that platform is search, but search is but one of many technologies that we need in order to have a thriving, functional collective superintelligence. So this just shows that it's just about starting. Start with the tools that we've got, and then go from there.
That was a great answer. Thank you. I'm going to jump in. I've been watching the live stream feed on Facebook, and there's a question there. What do we do with the schism of those who do not share our values? Are there many different versions of collective intelligence?
Are you taking that, Jamen?
Oh,
Are you
Silas,
waiting?
please. I'm happy to, but I defer to you.
No, this is your time.
Okay.
I really want to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And from Nolan, yeah.
Yeah, so I would say at first, the first thing is just ignore them, right? And let's us get together who have this collective vision. So rather than spend my time arguing with people who are denying that we have problems or denying that eating meat is bad or whatever, I'd rather be talking with you all and forming, better ideas and better plans for implementation. Now, having said that, part of our implementation plans and part of our ideas are about including and bringing in our other, brothers and sisters from within our own species into the conversation and into the movement, not just to assimilate them, but so that they can in turn become part of it and enrich it with their own ideas and their own creativity. But so I really see it as sort of a thing in stages. But right now, my interest is more working with the choir, so to speak. And when I say the choir, what I don't mean is the high priests. What I mean is the people who basically say, yeah, this all sounds good. Yes, I know that there are more questions than answers at this point, but I'm in. And let's all work together so that we can build up a great platform and community that will then invite and entice and inspire the rest of humanity and the rest of our brother and sister species.
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree with you. But so long as we keep our intention for everyone, we're trying to get the planet to flourish, then I think we should initially just ignore the people who are trying to play a different game, okay, who are still in the old game, who are trying to make their monopoly flourish, so to speak.
Can I jump in with, there's a question that's in the QA box that I think is relevant to this one. And I guess the question I have, Jamen, you gave the example earlier of, you know, if there's all these things that are on, going on, all these meetings going on simultaneously, and you're, you know, getting into one topic and 5 things pop up and 3 of them want to share, you know, you gave that example earlier. Like, I guess, can it filter to that level of making sure that you're maintaining the conversation with the choir, as opposed to somebody else who's, you know, passionate about the topic but has a completely different and possibly opposing solution?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, this can all be facilitated, and this is part of the game that we're all co-creating here. Is how do we do that? And so, and we run into this all the time. So, for example, on the Collective Intelligence Block Party, which is literally open to every single human being on the planet to join. So you get all different people with all different agendas jumping in there, and the conversation meanders here and there and everywhere. And like a meandering river. And that's probably a good starting point, because where we then see this expanding to is from a single big river to a whole river basin geomorphology, where you've got all kinds of branching and branching and branching, so that people who want to talk with other carnivores about why carnivorism is good and needs to be defended, they can go have that conversation. I'm fully supportive of them having that conversation, even though I totally disagree with the premise, right? And so it's to some degree, it's about dividing those who want to wrestle, giving them a place to wrestle, and those who want to love, giving them a place to love, and so on, speaking metaphorically.
Okay, and this sounds like perhaps an artificial intelligence that would have the intelligence to learn as it goes about what the distinctions are. Because even within the people who care about saving the planet right now, there are some who are saying in order to do it, we have to go vegan. There are others who are saying there's a different solution and they're not addressing veganism at all. So I would imagine that the intelligence is learning as there are more and more conversations coming online as well.
Yeah, if I can just quickly follow on that, Deborah. We were just talking about this yesterday in the Solution Club, and imagining, it's not too hard to imagine, an AI bot, of which there can be myriad copies, one of which would be Jamen's AI bot that just listens to Jamen, and its job is to essentially build out a taxonomy of A, what Jamen knows, and B, what Jamen believes. Now, and then C, what Jamen wants. And having productive conversations is largely, but not entirely, about figuring out for those 3 sets of information about Jamen, and then those 3 sets of information about Silas and about Nolan and about Deborah and about Rebecca and Suzanne. Okay, how do we form combinations of these people with a shared intent and enough commonality about both knowledge and belief, very different things, but enough commonality that we can come together and have a reasonable conversation? But if someone has great intent, let's say, but very little knowledge about climate change, you know, the deep conversation that Nolan and Silas and I and Suzanne and Rebecca and Professor Guy McPherson and others want to have about, okay, how do we really, you know, address the loss of global dimming and do SRM and all that? Someone who's just learning the basics, maybe there's a different meeting where a bunch of people who are learning the basics can learn it together. So kind of like how we separate preschool children from postdocs, likewise, but the point is ultimately about bringing us all together. Ultimately, I believe there is one truth, right? And there is one best path forward. And it involves stopping killing and cooling the planet and a bunch of other really great things. But that's my personal belief. But based on that belief, I believe that even if we start in different places, we can all end up in the same place.
Excellent.
Yeah, part of what we discussed actually with Jean-Francois, I think it was the 2nd day or the 3rd day of the summit, was the idea that if we just shoot for efficiency, we won't be resilient. So there is this this marriage between resiliency and efficiency. So you have to have a system that's sufficiently resilient and reasonably efficient. So it may not be the most efficient solution, but it is the most stable solution, the most prosperous solution. And there is a range that they talk about. This is the work of Bernard Latier at UC Berkeley, who discovered that. So this has been a great learning experience for me, just talking to all of you, because there's so much that I don't know that I realize that talking to you all helps me grow my own brain. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I can see if I've got all three of those bots working on my behalf on the internet artificially, I might just get to stay in bed and have it take off. Right? But I wouldn't do that.
Representing Deborah, right? Your bot.
Yes. Yeah. It's kind of funny and kind of not. All right, so while we're on this, I'm going to go with Miles's question from the Q&A box, and then we'll go back to Rebecca's list of questions. All right, so Miles says, here's a statement: Arizona milk producers, and it's quote, "You can help get nutrient-rich milk to kids and families in our community who struggle with food insecurity. The question is, how might radical collective intelligence help sort out the truth from the deception? For example, there are factual errors and deception in the aforementioned statement. Milk is really a significant cause of food insecurity." All right, and so I'll just put that out as the question. You may have already, if you already answered it, then say so, but I'm going to just put it out there anyway.
Yeah.
Jamen, how would collective intelligence address that?
Yeah, totally. So I'm going to ask Nolan to help out as well, but just to put some framing, there are several conversations in parallel that would need to be had to address that and to debunk it. Number one is the nutrition conversation, just an objective analysis of the nutritional effects of drinking milk, whether RBST enhanced or RBST free and organic versus not, and et cetera, et cetera. Okay, have those conversations and those branched out conversations, because some people think that, well, as long as it's organic, then it's good, right? And so on. So break that out, but that's about nutrition. So a cluster of conversations around nutrition, another cluster around environmental impacts of raising livestock, and those can be include simple conversations about just look at the facts and data, more complex conversations where an Alan Savory comes in and starts presenting his particular view of the world, et cetera, et cetera. So nutrition, ecological, and then alternatives, right? Like I blend up oats and hemp and make oat hemp milk, right? For example, and that we have great alternatives, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd break it out into essentially a taxonomy of topics, and then have, so to speak, at the top of this taxonomy, kind of a central, high level conversation or set of conversations where all this can be synthesized. Okay. Now I see all the facts and all the syntheses coming out of these focused conversations. What's the big picture? So this is all sense making. We need to make sense of it so that we can then, in this case, debunk it and replace it with a better operating strategy.
Great, thank you. Okay, I have a question here. What tech tools does radish.org hope to employ in the short term to manage the content of hundreds of hours of block parties, social clubs, meetings of Vegan World 2026 projects, etc.?
Well, I will happily defer to Nolan for that one.
Sure. Well, I've been taking notes during the solution clubs and the block parties, noting timestamps so we can go back and find specific points in the recording, making those very refined. Right now is just, it's a completely manual process. And one of the tools I've been experimenting with recently is called Roam, at roamresearch.com. Roam, like to wander. And it's a very cool note-taking application that's still in development right now, but it relies on a graph database underneath it. So essentially you can have a giant body of notes with very easy cross-referencing. So putting all the information that we've collected into this application, which is still under development, that's one thing that's on my list of to-dos with the information that we've collected. Another group to check out that's working on knowledge repositories, as they call them, is Kiko Lab, and I can put the link to that. It's .org. I just put that in the chat there. CICOLAB.org. Lauren Nignon and Charlie Blass are the leaders of that organization, and the last I checked, the main tool they were using for organizing their information was primarily Workflowy, which is essentially an infinite document. So you can make a bulleted list. Any of those bullets you can click in, and it becomes a page into itself that you can store more information, and then you can keep doing that process. The nice part about Roam research that I mentioned earlier is that you can have pages, like say you go 3 levels deep into a page, and that 3rd level deep could actually refer back to the start if you wanted to. So I guess the short answer is the tools for really managing the vast amount of information that's generated in these conversations, those tools are still works in progress. And there are tools like those note-taking applications I mentioned, Roam and Workflowy. And so that's part of the tool set. Another part of the tool set is there's a whole nother conversation to be had about artificial intelligence. I'm not an expert there. I've worked a little bit in the field. I have friends that do work with machine learning. So I have enough of a taste to, to feel how things are developing. Another great resource that people might want to check out is a YouTube channel called 2 Minute Papers. And he focuses quite a bit on artificial intelligence and the developments there. And the content he's been putting out recently is very powerful. He's basically revealing to the public the state of this cutting edge artificial intelligence, which whether or not we like it, is being used in closed source, more manipulative kind of ways. And so I've said a lot and I think I've kind of veered away from the initial question. So in short, the tools are still under development. Right now, it's a lot of manual note-taking. I would definitely check out Kiko Lab and their work on knowledge repositories.
I have a follow-up to that, Nolan. If you could address this, because when I took the plant-based nutrition course at Cornell, they were teaching us how to take out papers that were funded by the industry. That's misinformation, disinformation. So they're teaching us to look at who funded this paper. Throw that away if it is funded by a source that has vested interest in the results, right? So this allowed us to sift out true information from garbage that's floating out there. Because there's a lot of garbage out there, right? So do you think an AI could help sift out true information from nonsense?
What occurs to me right now is that I think AI, it's best to consider it a tool for achieving it depends on the intent of the designer and the user of the AI. I think that it's a very interesting conversation that you're opening up here. And I can see some very serious danger in terms of censorship. And but there's two sides of it. There's well, you could design an AI that is essentially promoting certain kinds of information. Maybe that's the right information, but maybe it's not. You could also design an AI that's just basically trying to give people the information that they want to receive. And a problem there is, okay, well, then isn't the AI just allowing you to stay even more in your own echo chamber? And
Right.
I mean, I think that's already a pretty serious issue with YouTube, but I guess they're still dealing with both ends of that. So that's a really good question. I don't know. I don't have a straightforward answer.
I've got something. Oh yeah, thanks. I've got something to add. So if you just take what I was talking about earlier about a taxonomy of knowledge and an understanding of intent, then it'd be very simple to marry those two together and say, okay, well, this paper was funded by Tyson Foods. Well, what's the intent of Tyson Foods? And that's easily discernible. It's right there on their website. I'll just paraphrase it. We are here to maximize money to the owners of this company, which is in the business of killing animals and chopping them up and wrapping them in single-use plastic and unicell styrofoam and other environmentally damaging materials to sell them to people who are sufficiently misguided as to buy such products. That's the intent. So if you want to see a construction of data and analysis that supports that intent, please read this paper, right? But don't fool yourself as to what the intent is, right? It's et cetera. So I think it's simply a matter of layering the appropriate data on top of the artifact in question, in this case, a technical paper, right? Intent, perspective, history, what's it building upon? What are the sources that it's referencing? What was the intent behind those? And so anyway, you can go deeper and deeper, but that's what I wanted to say.
Nice.
Okay, there was a question about personal interest, a person of interest. Let me see, it's at 3:37. Deborah, do you see that or?
Yeah. And so I'm not sure, there's two people logged on as climate healers right now, so I'm not sure who the second person is and where this is coming from, but it's, it says, I only saw the first several episodes of A Person of Interest, but I'm imagining a benevolent use of the digital surveillance and big data parsing gear that is being used, in quotes, against us in secret, used to solve global issues such as inequality and climate crises. That's a comment there. I didn't know if you want to comment on that. Any thoughts?
I think that's a great comment, and yeah, I totally vibe with that. That is what I'm trying to what I'm getting at when I'm talking about open sourcing, because these technologies are being used whether we like it or not,
Right.
and the intent behind them is incredibly important. They can be used for extremely harmful purposes or constructive purposes.
Any other thoughts on that from?
No, I like your analogy of Linux. You know, making it all completely open source, giving it to people and saying, you can contribute what you want to this. And this is the intent behind this project. I mean, usually like even Linux, I'm sure Linus Torvalds wrote a whole bunch of it, but he gave it away and let people add to it, and people enhanced it. So that's in a nutshell, that's what we are trying to do at the Vegan World 2026 project as well. To us, the veganism is just the foundation. We are building a complete taxonomy on top of that, you know. Just the foundation is veganism. And it's an ethical stance. To me, veganism is an ethical stance that says that animals should be left alone to live their lives without being exploited by human beings. And that includes us. We are also animals. So we shouldn't be exploited either. So it encompasses not just animal rights, but also, social justice issues, all under one umbrella.
Yeah, thank you. So we have another one from Facebook.
Yeah, it was kind of a discussion going on in the comment section, and the research brought up about communicating animals was being discussed. One of the viewers said that that worries them because sorry, I'm trying to find it. The fact that we can't understand animals protects them, says one Facebook viewer, and the response is, how does that protect them when animals are being destroyed? And then a follow-up at the end asking if you guys can comment on why one person might think it was protective that animals aren't understood.
Yeah, I mean, this research was done over a 20-year period, and the professor claims that by using that methodology, you can actually start understanding what other animals are telling each other and telling us. And in a way, it helps us understand animals as beings with their own sentience, and they have their own language. They're communicating with each other. It's just that we didn't understand them so far. Even though I think everyone who lives with a companion animal would agree that companion animals understand us better than we understand them, clearly. I mean, I took my hat off to my dogs because they could tell exactly what I'm thinking most of the time. So, so clearly we have lost something in the interspecies communication. I think we probably used to be able to do it better. This is why I see indigenous communities seem to have that ability still. And those of us who are in the technological society have kind of lost it. And we're using technology to kind of retrieve that a bit so that we can get back to our roots. That's the way I see it being used.
If I could add to that, Silas. So the question is really good about, is it good or bad for a given species that we can understand what they're saying? And that's all about where humanity is coming from. So for example, with the crows, you know, we feed the crows, give them water. I literally sing Spanish love songs to the crows, believe it or not. And I give them the love call like they send to us. And it's just so amazing. But you see, I have good intent. I want nothing more than to love and protect and care for and be a part of the lives of these crows. But humanity as a whole is still quite toxic to other species and ecosystems. And so I can imagine a scenario where somebody says, hey, great, let's put up all these sensors and listening devices, and then we'll have this big open source database about exactly what all these animals are saying. Hunters could tap into that database and say, great, you know, this whole herd of venison's going off to the east. Let's go mow them down. Yeehaw! Lock and load. You know, so we need to get our heads screwed on right as a species. We cannot have these rogue brothers and sisters of ours going off and slaughtering. So, and then that gets back to collective superintelligence. How do we create a game that is just so appealing, so fun, so enriching, so healing, so nourishing? Who would not want to play in that game, right? And that's really our challenge. So until we get our heads screwed on right, you know, it's going to be glass half empty, glass half full across myriad questions. Well, should we do this or should we not do this? Until we have our heads screwed on right, anything that I can hold in my hand could be toy, tool, weapon, right? Depending on where my head is screwed on, right? So, thank you.
Thank you both. That is it for questions on Facebook. I don't know, BJ or Deborah, are there more questions on Zoom?
No, I don't see any more questions on here. Thank you so much,
There's
though.
another comment from the climate healers. I don't know if we want to comment on that. I know, and I'm still not sure who that is. Silas, that's not you typing that in, is it?
No, it's not.
Okay. Okay.
That sounds like Ray.
Okay. Is that right? Okay. I'll just read it in case you guys want to comment on it as a final comment. Or says, all leading tech was developed first for the military. Our belligerence was a critical phase where nature leveraged our urgent clashes to accelerate our collective intelligence. Now we can take her temperature, cure her fever, and learn how to turn our massive defense budgets into a quote unquote make friends budget in a collaborative post-war vegan society.
Right. Yeah, this, you know, I mean, this is really what's happening with the COVID-19. You know, I mean, countries are sending their supplies to other countries, helping each other out. This is, the front lines have become healers, right? The healers are on the front lines of this. So yeah. So thank you both very much for this amazing conversation. I enjoyed myself, and I'm sure everyone on Zoom and Facebook were equally thrilled by what was going on here. And so tomorrow we're going to swing 180 degrees from technology to art and storytelling. And so we're going to be talking to Melissa Cook, and I'm really looking forward to that. Because how do we tell stories in the COVID-19 era that bring us together and therefore get our heads screwed on right, as Jamen was pointing out. So thank you all for joining us, and please join us again tomorrow.
Thank you, Silas, Nolan, Rebecca, Suzanne, Deborah, Ann, and everyone who's been contributing all the great questions. Love what you're doing. Love you all so much. Rock on, blessings, and thank you.